Preface. I was terribly excited when my 23andMe ancestry test report showed up in my email, and horribly disappointed when I read it. "What were you expecting?" asked my cousin Roger when I called him up to share my disillusionment. "I'm not sure," I replied. "I was hoping if I went back far enough, I'd find a prince or a baron in our family, or at least something above the rank of foul-smelling peasant." Well, as far as I can tell, the closest our family may have come to royalty was emptying their chamber pots, and even then, it's doubtful we would have been allowed into the palace. As much as I hated to agree with him, I realized he was probably right. And so, after taking one last hopeful look, I deleted the entire report from my computer. Then, some months later, and totally out of the blue, I met a man at a wine tasting event in Chicago who introduced himself as a long-lost cousin. "Your great-grandfather and my great-grandmother were brother and sister. They emigrated from Plunge in Lithuania in the 1890s. Your great-grandfather to South Africa and my great-grandmother to America." "How incredible," I said, clinking glasses with my new relative. "But how do you know all this?" "From your late mother's first cousin who lives in Houston. He's an absolute font of knowledge on all things to do with our family history. Here, let me give you his email." And so began a relationship with Jonathan Smulian, a remarkable man who, while unable to provide links to dukes or princes, supplied intriguing stories and photos of my mother's family. They ranged from Russian revolutionaries to World War II flying aces, from a brilliant lawyer, his father, who helped to destroy an infamous Nazi organization in South Africa, to a failed ostrich farmer. Interesting, I thought, but only to members of the family. At about the same time, another cousin in Australia, this time on my father's side, started a Facebook page for the descendants of Abram Isakovich, my great-grandfather. He'd emigrated from Riga to the UK around 1888, changed his name to Abraham Harris, and opened a number of pubs in the East End of London. I suppose I should have been happy to learn that not all my ancestors groveled to the gentry or shoveled manure for a living, but I wasn't. I began to do my own research into the times and places they lived, determined to find something, if not indecorous, then at least more intriguing than ostrich farming. Another Jonathan, this time Jonathan Keats, writing in the New Scientist, says, "Focusing on the specific makes us less likely to see the true probability." And that's exactly what I did. Gave up specifics and focused on the off chance that someone in the old arbor familiae could actually be a somebody. I reread my father's memoirs of his time in India during World War II and discovered that he was sent to the northwest frontier at precisely the time 2 German spies were assassinated in that most mysterious of regions. From the photos that Jonathan Smulian sent me, I saw that Mina Capellas, my mother's great-aunt, a member of the left SR party, was killed by the Bolsheviks, and her coffin displayed in the streets of Moscow. Why, I asked myself, was it within the bounds of believability that she had played a part in the failed attempt to kill Lenin? Then, of course, there is the story that first set me on my quest to prove that at least someone in my family wouldn't have bored the pants off you. I'm referring to Abram Isakovich. Why did an innocuous young man from Riga, whose profession in the census of the late 1880s was listed as tailor, change his name and buy the pub where one of Jack the Ripper's victims was last seen? I'm indebted to Jonathan Smulian for all his help and encouragement and for giving me the grand idea for the genesis of this story, which coincidentally does actually go back to about the time of Genesis. I'm sure there are a few members of the family who won't think that being the descendants of a group of assassins is in the least bit amusing. I'd offer my apologies if I felt they were necessary. After all, truth may be stranger than fiction, but it's not as much fun. That is, of course, if you believe I'm not telling the truth.